We're live with Jamie Jacobs from Gig Talent. She's the CEO and founder of Gig Talent. I'm Greg Roche, the Introverted Networker. We're going to talk a little bit today about fractional work, the gig workforce, the future of work. And I met Jamie through another consultant group that I had become a part of when I started my consulting practice myself. And so I was just partnering with anybody I could who did something similar to what I was doing or who worked with my ideal client in different ways. And we met at a conference about a year ago, probably almost exactly. I think it was in May of last year we met, and Jamie talked a lot about Gig Talent, what she's doing there. And so I, dug in there more and have sort of started to become a part of the Gig Talent group or family or however you want to refer to it there, Jamie. But
Sure.
why don't you tell us a little bit about how you decided to found Gig Talent, kind of what Gig Talent is and why it's different than maybe what people normally think about consulting or sort of contract type work.
Yeah, thanks so much. I loved my career in corporate America as an HR
Hmm.
executive. When I left in 2018 and went on my own, I had a bunch of friends who were peers and they were like, I want to do what you're doing, but I'm afraid. I'm afraid of sales and business development. I just want to do the
Hmm.
work that I love and I'm good at. And then a couple of them the next sentence would be, but I hate my job. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't think, I don't think everyone should be a consultant. But I
Hmm.
also believe that nobody should stay where you hate your job,
Hmm.
and that at the same time, the laws in California were changing with how companies engage with independent contractors, and I was like, we can create something that solves that, right? Like, I just don't think that anybody should not do something because of fear. Right. And
Hmm.
so we could create something that can be that sales and marketing arm, really representing the best of the best talent of talented
Hmm.
people who are choosing to work differently. For clients, we can do the work to know who's good and what they're good at and do the background checks and all the compliance stuff.
Hmm.
Um, and now we've created a community like you talked about. And, my saying is that consulting doesn't have to be a lonely gig. And
Hmm.
so creating that uh, community of experts, I call them executive entrepreneurs. All
Yep.
of us have been successful executives. Many of us had an entrepreneurial bent and the courage to take the leap. So that's
Yeah.
how we started.
That loneliness thing as a consultant, that's something I definitely kind of started to feel when I started my own company was, and that's why I reached out to other consultants in other sort of collaboratives because, yeah, you're just out there on your own and you're trying to find clients and you're when you're struggling, there's not really anybody besides your family maybe to talk to, and it's good to feel like you're not the only one who's
Yeah,
feeling that way, and it
yeah,
just that idea makes it, so it's easier to kinda keep going and keep doing what you're doing because you're not the only one, but it's so when you kind of explain it, and you did just explain it, you're for people who are consultants, it's like all that stuff about sales and marketing and all that back office, you guys take care of that. And the consultants just go in and they're consultants. And so they don't have to worry about all those kind of things, which I think is really valuable for a consultant because most of us aren't salespeople. We're not marketing people. We're not BD type people. So it's awesome that, somebody else is willing to do that for us.
oh, thanks. It's been really fun. It's such a dynamic time, right? The world of work is changing. You
Mhm.
already started to talk about that, and we're now creating development opportunities, right? We're offering training around AI transformation, and that
Mm.
people can use within your own practice, right? For your own business,
Mhm.
for your own clients, and then obviously for engagements that people would get through gig. And that's like kind of bringing even more value that we were a startup, and so we were kind of figuring it
Mhm.
out. But as we look at our roadmap, like if we're being true to our purpose about adding value to all stakeholders, then that continued professional development, just because we're on our own doesn't mean we're not learning.
Right.
Most of us have continuous learning mindsets, right? So if we want to be cutting edge, we got to kind of keep doing that, which is cool.
Yeah. Yeah. What about like the clients? And I mean, when I say clients, I mean the people that are, you're placing consultants on a client. What do they come to you and ask for? Or how, what is it that they say like, "Hey, Jamie, here's what I need help with."
It's really wonderful because, a lot of them, like, they'll come to me because they have some kind of it'll be an HR need, but
Mhm.
they often don't know exactly, like, they don't know the nuances of difference, right? And part of the
Mhm.
value that we bring is by asking those next level questions to both understand what they really need and then also
Mhm.
get the right person. So, like, when our consultants get something through us, they say it feels like a custom tailored suit because it's the work. But what the
Mhm.
clients are asking for, often it's I'm having my HR person is leaving, and I need someone to bridge the gap while I determine what we need.
Mhm.
And so there might be just a list of things that their prior person was doing. And then I'll ask the
Mhm.
next level questions around, so what's going on with your business? Like, what's the business strategy? And
Mhm.
then you'll hear there's growth, there's acquisition, they're trying to position for a sale, I don't know, they're transform, doing
Mhm.
a digital transformation, whatever the thing is. And that's those nuances that they
Mhm.
didn't come searching for, like, with their HR person or their
Right.
total rewards person or whatever. But many of our consultants can really be helpful in driving those overarching business objectives too. So, but it's funny where they start.
Right, and so the opportunity for the client is there's almost like a ability to sort of upskill the role or upgrade that role. Maybe they won't do that long term, but in the short term, they get sort of that upgrade because of the experience that they're getting through gig talent. And I've kind of seen some of that with some of my clients is they would never hire me to do that role long term, just because given what the role is,
Yeah. Size
they
of the
don't have
company. Yeah.
yeah, like, my background and experience, they're like, "Yeah, we wouldn't you wouldn't want this role long term."
Right.
Right? But I can come in on a short-term fractional basis and come in and get them set, get them, ramped back up or get them where they
Yeah.
wanna be, and then they can bring that next person in. And I've always found the cool thing about the fractional is I don't have to run off somewhere to the next job,
Right.
right? And so I get a longer period to onboard those people and bring the new person in and really get them settled into the role before I sort of taper off and roll away. And that to me is a big thing that you usually don't get that sort of knowledge transition when you have people changing roles like that.
It's immensely valuable, and they can scale it based on the needs, right? Like you said, it can
Mhm.
taper off, and the value in that is, like, actually huge. So I was just talking to somebody, they had a fractional, like, CHRO or head of HR in there, and, the number was, like, a pretty big number. If they were just comparing that number times 12, the monthly
Mhm.
retainer times 12, it would be a lot more than they would hire somebody for at
Mhm.
that organization. But if you looked at number 1, a fully burdened, base, bonus, salary,
Mhm.
all that,
Yeah.
fully burdened that, and then also what they were spending on outside legal firms and
Mm.
all these other costs that they were, like, unnecessary spend with vendors that weren't being properly managed. So there was, like, when you look at the expense to the organization, they were actually saving substantial. And then
Mm.
they reduced their legal spend. They turned around the HR team, and it was, like, much higher. They were happier.
Mhm.
They had better role clarity. So they were getting better value of the internal employees that they had. And then, to your point, they're able to transition, like, a really
Mhm.
good situation to a new leader or onboard them successfully, have a situation that will attract someone.
Right.
And the CEO could feel really confident that the function is, like you said, has the fundamentals in place. I know you've done the
Right.
same thing. You and I actually talked about one time, sometimes people wait to make a change because they're just so nervous about that transition, and they're, like,
Right.
afraid, right? If there's been, maybe that person has all the knowledge. But when you have
Mhm.
somebody who's very experienced, like yourself, that can come in and bridge that gap,
Mhm.
if they need to make a change or the business has really
Right.
outgrown, has different needs, they can make that change because they can have you bridge that interim
Yeah.
period.
Yeah. But do you find a lot of leaders are now sort of coming around and coming to this realization that there's this fractional workforce out there? Or is it still like so new that there's a lot of leaders that are like, I don't know, I've heard about that, but I don't really understand how that's going to work?
This is, like, my favorite question. I think it's both. I'm still seeing both. So I kind of think it's a new class of talent.
Hmm.
This idea that, we're not, like, people who couldn't get a job or
Mhm.
who suck or who are using a 20-year-old playbook, like all the
Mhm.
consultant kind of narrative that you
Right.
hear. Like, no, these are people who are like actually so good at whatever their niche is and they love
Mhm.
it that they created their own practice doing that and they want to have
Mhm.
impact across organizations. And the ones who get it, and plenty of them are starting to get it now, they're like, oh, I can plug and play. I need a total rewards person for this. I need
Mhm.
I need a leader, a fractional leader for this. I need somebody to build leadership development. I need somebody to do my offsite. I want a bench of executive coaches. And like they're like, and I just have one call. I just call Jamie, like I just
Right.
called Big Talent, and like she helps diagnose and does the matching and gives me like it's we make it easy, right? And so
Mhm.
I think the ones that get it really get it, and they understand that that spend, the way they can manage the variability in spend on what they really
Mhm.
need, which isn't always, especially for small, medium-sized companies, it's not always a full-time job, right?
Right. Yeah. Right, and they think about it like that in those terms of they're like, "Oh, I can't take that full-time role. I just don't have that head count, or I don't have the budget for that." But they're like, I didn't know I could get a part-time person and probably get most of what I need.
Yeah,
And, we can get this going, and then I again, don't have to put somebody in that role forever or full-time, or I can bring in somebody else to maintain it. I think the other thing which you just said is another selling point. I'm sure you do this with clients. Is like you just have one master services agreement or with me, right?
exactly.
Like you don't have all these consultants. You're not going to have all these different contracts with all these different consultants with all these
Right,
all the your legal stuff going. It's just like one contract and then we're
right,
done, and
right.
you can get this whole array of different people. So I mean, I think for a lot of times they also are like, "Ah, I don't want to send this to legal. I don't want to have them like red
Procurement, yeah.
line them, go through procurement, do all that stuff. That sounds like so much work. And so they avoid doing it, right?
Our goal is to make it easy and also give them the confidence that, it's
Hmm.
compliant, right? And um yeah, I think it's a game changer, but it is new to your point. When we
Yeah.
started in 2019, I definitely think I had to do a lot more of explaining.
Right.
Now I think, obviously with COVID and the way that work has shifted, people understand. And they're only, I would say they're starting to build some sophistication to really use it to like drive
Yeah.
their business forward. Because some of it is they only like if they were thinking an HR leader, if they limited themselves by budget realities, then they thought, "This is what I can get, and this is
Hmm.
the experience," and based on whatever experience they had would set their expectation level. Um, and then when they meet people who have really, like, done some incredible things and can
Hmm.
bring that value, they're like, "Oh, I didn't know. I just didn't know," you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've found in some of my clients and stuff that they might look at me and they're like, "Wow, you're more experienced than we were kind of planning on," and that carries a higher cost, right? That's going to
Right.
be a higher cost, and I will usually say, "Yeah, but the here's the thing, I've made all these mistakes through my career, like, all this
Yes.
the I've screwed up all these things, and I know how to avoid screwing them up in the future, so I'm probably gonna do this in less time,
Oh,
just
totally.
by virtue of the experience, so it's actually gonna cost you less in the long run if we'll just get it done right the first time and we'll avoid all the other drama and everything that goes around with it, and then you'll be set." And
Yeah.
and they're like, "Oh, okay." When I think about it like that, that makes a lot of sense. So, how when you're kind of doing this, how do clients kind of find you? I mean, is it like just are you guys just out marketing or like what are you guys doing?
Yeah, so we grew really organically through just uh, relationships and network that we
Mhm.
had, and we have in the last, I would say, 9 months or so, been really upgrading that. We have a
Mhm.
PR firm, we have internal marketing resources, we've got so we've been really getting clearer about. The investment and go to market. And
Mhm.
we actually hired Dave Foley, who was one of the first 8 salespeople at LinkedIn, and he's
Mm.
going to
Oh,
market
wow.
on behalf of the
Cool.
collective. So we're making that investment, and it's substantial, right? And that's like to
Mhm.
your point around could any individual like it's hard to do the work and like that's always a
Right.
complaint, right? How do I do the work but then be looking for the next thing and networking
Mhm.
and we all know some people who I'm just like, gosh, I don't know how you literally go to every event and have time to do your work. It's like amazing.
Mhm.
But it feels a little unsustainable, or the mix maybe isn't enough where they'd want it, because you really want to be doing stuff you get paid for and then really enjoy. And if you love networking, then
Mhm.
great. But not everybody does, to your tagline.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so, so I think that's like one of the real values that we can bring in. And now we're really leaning in, which is pretty fun.
Yeah. So let's talk about consultants themselves, right? So somebody who and the focus that you guys focus on HR consultants, that's kind of your niche, right? Somebody who's an HR consultant or thinking about getting into it, if they're thinking about engaging with somebody like Gig Talent, what do they really need to know? Like, what do they need to bring, or what is it that you're kind of looking for? Because I'll talk to people sometimes. They're like, I've thought about going out on my own, but usually the thing that you said, like, they're like, I don't want to do the sales stuff. I don't want to do the business development. Like, that's stopping them from doing it. Um, I also think a lot of times I'll say, well, what would you do? Like, what would be the consulting that you would do, or what problems would you solve? And sometimes they're like, I don't know, I could do a little bit of everything. And
Yeah.
and I'm usually like, "Yeah, that's you're gonna need to get more specific than that. That's not gonna help anybody if you say I'll do everything."
It's such a good question. When I first went on my own, I actually went away for myself, like by myself for 2 or 3 weeks, just to think about that. Like, what brings me joy? And
Mhm,
I know that sounds like a luxury, but if you're going to make the leap from a career you love, like you want to
mhm,
do something that you are good at
right.
and enjoy. Um, and somebody gave me advice, and I think this is where you're going, which is they said people will want to help you, but they need to know how. So if you just say, I do a little bit of
Yeah,
everything, or I'm an HR
100%.
consultant, that's like too generic, right? Like,
Mhm,
we all know a million, well, probably the bubble we're in, we know a million HR consultants. Like,
yeah,
what is it? When should I think of you? So
mhm,
I think some of the advice is definitely around think about what brings you joy, and you're uniquely good at it. I can tune into the pit in the stomach fear that people have that sometimes makes us want to say yes to everything. And I'll tell you, the couple
mhm,
times when I did, I was like, somebody else would be better at this than I am,
mhm.
right? Like, and
Yep,
that's not a good feeling. So,
yep,
think about what you really want to do. Um, for us, like, so there are lots of partners now, like different types of work. Some people are consultants they're employees of consulting firms. Like, that's one way to
mm,
go about it, right? There's some people like they don't necessarily want to have a business entity and get
right.
insurance and deal with all that stuff. Um, for us, we're like you said, HR and transformation. So organizational effectiveness, offsite
Mhm,
facilitation, leadership development, fractional HR, and leaning in heavily with like redesigning work and
mhm,
all the things that are happening. So if people but you don't have to wanna do all of that, right? Like, so maybe somebody's like,
yeah,
I'm an amazing facilitator. I'm an executive coach. I'm I help transformation at an individual level or a team level or
mhm,
enterprise level. So I think getting specific about what you like to do, but the caveat there is so many of us get pressured to productize our offerings. And
mm,
that's maybe not a bad idea, like, just to help
yeah,
you go to market with something, but I think where we see people struggle is if they get too fixed on that, like, "This is my offering, this is what
right.
I do," and that's actually not most people don't call us and go, "I want X, Y, and Z." Like, it's maybe a good way to frame
No,
a conversation,
yeah,
but the nuance is, can you have that chemistry call or initial engagement call and help
mhm,
shape a solution? You used the word earlier, it's totally what it is, the solution for what they need, and just leverage the deep experience that you have in a way that will
mhm.
solve the challenges they're facing.
And that's why and I obviously, been thinking about this conversation. So I ask about what clients say in terms of what their problems are, what they bring to you, and then I am exactly aligned with you on you have to get really specific about what it is you do.
Yeah.
What do you solve? Whose problem do you solve? And how do you solve that problem, or how do you describe that problem in their words? And the reason I always encourage people that whether they're looking for a job or whether they're building a business or they're looking for clients, what does your client say that their problem is that you solve? Because when you do that, then and you can tell people, and this is part of my whole networking approach is
Yeah.
people who know that, like when you give somebody a really specific memorable problem that you solve and the person you do it for, when they hear those words out in the world, they will automatically think of you and say to that person, I know a guy that you should connect with because he does exactly what you're looking for. Now, not every person you talk to in the world is going to use those words, and
Right.
you don't want them. You just want the person. But the more people you tell those words, the more people will hear them, and they will be like, you got to connect with this guy because he does exactly what it is you're looking for. And so then you're like doing what you want to do, right?
Right.
You have to reflect and do what you want to do, but you're letting people know, and then they go, that was really easy to help you. I want to help people. You're really easy to help because you told me exactly what to listen for. And when I heard it, I felt awesome. I got this rush of good feeling because I knew I could help you and I could help this person I was talking to, and bam, like that. And I think people struggle with that because they think if I'm so specific, I'll never connect with anybody. I'll never get work. I'll never get a job. And it's easy to feel that way. You do have to do work. You have to get out there and connect. You have to talk to people. You have to have conversations. You got to give people these words. But I never cease to be amazed at how often those things happen, where somebody goes, "I referred this person to you because you do this exact thing," and they said this is what they were looking for, and I'm like, that's the goal. That's what it's supposed to happen. So I think again for consultants, it's uncomfortable because you're like, I need to get an invoice paid. I need money to hit my bank account. But if you don't get specific, you're still not, nobody's going to pick you because why would they pick you versus all the other people who are like HR generalists or I can do anything or whatever? Like, why would they pick you out of all those people?
Yeah, well, they're gonna call the guy who said the thing, right? Like,
R-
they're gonna
Yeah.
call whoever said the thing that solves that need, and, there's I don't know if you're a member of Provisors or if you've ever done those kinds of groups, some of those networking groups where they start and everybody kinda does their elevator pitch.
Hmm.
Um, on one hand, it's like my worst nightmare. On the other hand, it's really great discipline because it
Yeah.
forces you to have something to say. And you
Hmm.
hear others and you're like, oh, that was amazing. I'm never going to forget that one. And now I like need to up my game. Right. And so
Yeah.
it's a good forcing mechanism.
What do you think are the best ones? Like, I have an opinion, but I ask you, like, when you heard ones that were awesome, why were they awesome?
They were memorable, they were specific, and most of them had a little bit of humor for me. Like if,
Okay.
not cheesy, but
Right. Yeah. I generally tell people specific equals memorable. Like,
yeah,
if you can get specific, but simple and specific. And what I mean by that is I feel like too many elevator pitches are full of all sorts of corporate industry jargon
they are.
that go on for like 3 or 4 sentences that I'm never gonna remember. And I might not even understand it. Like, I might not even understand what you're talking about. Like, you might be in a industry that I don't know a lot about, and you threw all these words out, and I'm like, "I don't get that." And
I
the problem with
tuned
that
out after the first two.
well, and the problem with that is nobody talks like that
Right.
in normal life. Nobody talks in those words. It sounds good, but, like, I I wouldn't hear anybody use those words in my real life to know, "Oh, that's what this guy at this networking event does." And so that's why I tell people, specifics good, get simple, really small words, really easy to understand for anybody who's, like, not in that industry, and, use that,
Yeah.
and that way you're memorable and it carries on out into the world so that people can connect with you.
There was one, it was like he was something like an insurance broker or something, and
Mhm.
he said, "I show up when people need it the most, or in the moments people need the
Yeah.
most, when they've lost a family member or their house,
Mhm.
and I help," and it was like, okay, that he started like on the flip side, and I remember that, and I still struggle with it. I mean,
Yeah.
I could talk about HR, I could talk about
Mhm.
transformation, there's lots of people that do that,
Sure.
or I could say, um, people call us when they're growing fast, changing fast, and need help figuring it out, or something. But I still work on it. I
Yeah.
struggle too.
Yeah, I mean, I try to always think about it in terms of my total rewards consulting, right? Like, I help HR executives figure out if they're paying people enough, you know?
Okay. Yeah.
Because I tend to think, when I have conversations with CHROs or whatever, they're like, "We're not really sure if we're paying enough or if we're paying too much. We don't really know. So we need you to come, like, do the analysis and tell us." Um, and so that way, most people can understand what that means. But
And
yeah,
you can extrapolate the rest, right? They're like, well, if he can
sure.
do that, he could also do these other things. So,
Right. Well, you go, okay, this guy deals with pay. And, if I tell average people that, I sometimes they're like, oh, you do payroll? I'm like, no, 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 no. Payroll is when you actually put the money in the bank. Like
like,
compensation was you figure out how much money to put in the bank. And so, sometimes it gets a little off. So I've got to work with it a little bit. But
well, that's good.
um, most people who, are going to remember that and talk with somebody who's in HR would, be would understand what that is. So, but yeah, I always work on it too. It's an evolving thing, right?
Yeah, and the truth is, like, your practice will evolve,
Yeah.
um, and the climate and the, like, I don't know, what's important for businesses today
Mhm.
continues to evolve. So that's the other thing, right? Like, don't be in a silo. Like,
Mm.
we're in really dynamic times, and so,
Mhm.
um, and we evolve. Like, I don't. How long? When did you leave corporate? How long has it been?
It's almost been 2 years. It'll be 2 years at the end of the summer here. So, not long, only a couple years. So,
But, like, so I left I designed my exit in 2018, right? So it's been
mhm.
a long, like, what is that, 8 years?
Yeah.
And, I've learned a ton in that amount of time, and so you incorporate that. But it's interesting in these times, like, I've even you know how, like, companies are having challenges, like, validating skills and, like,
Mhm.
is the resume real and whatever.
Right.
It's kind of the same even in the fractional and gig world. Like, people can claim anything, you can bill
Right.
yourself as a chief whatever, but, how do I think that making sure you have the chops, and so that alignment, that self-awareness is really important because the title doesn't matter so much. It's can you
Mhm.
really add value and get the outcomes, and if you can, then those relationships, like, you'll be the person they call.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, well, is if somebody so let me ask you this. Okay. So, cuz I know from my own experience, you guys like it's not just like every HR consultant that shows up, you're like, "Okay, jump on board." Like you guys have a process around this. Like you guys kind of validate that and you make sure that everybody kind of, does what they say they can do. So, what kind and I understand that's the value, right? Your clients
Yeah.
get that value because you've kind of already screened to make sure, hey, this person who says they can do this, they really can do this. So,
Right. Yeah. So
right?
we call it a certification process, and
Mhm.
it's definitely the compliance stuff, which is a little bit boring, but it's important.
Yeah,
The background checks, the
yeah,
reference checks. We actually
mhm,
do assessments, and one of the things we're even adding is like a sample chemistry call,
mm,
because one of
mhm,
the reasons that we're not reasons, but one of the challenges that we see some consultants really struggle with, I alluded to it earlier, is this, like, when they're talking to the client, can they shape the engagement? And as much
mhm,
as like, we'll do a lot of that on
mhm.
behalf of the consultant,
Yeah,
but I don't want to shape it too specifically because I'm not the one doing the work, right? Like,
right. Yeah,
and so you want to come in and be able to do that, but they have to be able to, like, kind of meet that conversation where it is, and not everyone can do that. So if people are
mhm,
thinking about being a consultant, like, think about, are you comfortable in that conversation? Because whether
mhm,
it's through someone like a gig talent or it's on your own, you're going to need to be able to shape those kinds of engagements.
yeah. Okay. So, let's say that there's, somebody out there who's like, "I've always thought about fractional consulting, but, like, I didn't really know how to do it, and I didn't know who to talk to." How do they get in touch with you guys at
Yes.
Gig Talent?
Well, I would love for you to check us out. So our website is gigtalentagency.com. If you scroll to the bottom, there's a link there to find out about becoming a gig talent consultant. There's a ton of information. If
Mhm.
you fill out the form, you'll talk to one of us. And
Yep.
I talk to people all the time about this journey, and I think that there's not a right or wrong answer. It's really about feeling like you have impact, and I call it preferment, where you get to do what you prefer. Good work with good people, and that's what we're all
Mhm.
about. So,
You have so many great terms. You've got the executive entrepreneurs, you've got the preferment. What's a third one you got so we can
yeah.
just round out the nice even
Uh,
3?
yeah, I think yeah, I those are the two big ones.
Okay.
Preferment and executive entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I just think it's something that people don't think about, and I believe that it's really a different. Um, it's not about good or bad or better or worse. It's just
Hmm.
a certain confidence
Prefer.
based on
Mhm.
your achievement. So, yeah.
Yep. Yep. Awesome. Well, thank you for jumping on this Substack live with me.
So
And
fun.
yeah, yeah, it's fun. I'm gonna try to do more of these. So pretty easy to straightforward to get ramped up. And so once we end, it'll just end and you'll go away. And but you and I can connect later on. And
Look forward to
I need to talk to you about some gig talent stuff. So
Perfect. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much for having me, and thanks for those who joined. Have a great
yeah.
day.
All right.
All
Thanks,
right.
Jamie.
Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye.